Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion, Parshat Vaetchanan, contains two of the best-known passages in the entire Torah, the Ten Commandments and the Shema. In his commentary on this week's portion, Rabbi Chaim Potok, best known as the American author of the book The Chosen, notes that the Shema is actually a commentary on the first commandment of the Ten Commandments, namely, that you should have no other gods besides me. Let's look at the Shema for a few minutes. Most classical translations of the Shema render the first line as, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." In the book of Deuteronomy, the word Shema has a range of meanings that begin with the basic meaning of hearing and range all the way to the meaning of understanding and obeying, as in the phrase, "Ve'ata Yisrael, Shema el hachukim ve'el hamishpatim asher anochi melamed etchem la'asot." Now, O Israel, obey the laws and the statutes that I am instructing you to observe. Once again, in the first line of the Shema, the words Shema and Yisrael appear in tandem, but they mean far more, I think, than Hear, O Israel. I would suggest that as a commentary on the first commandment of the Ten Commandments, the Shema is urging us to obey that commandment by declaring that the Lord, our God, is one, that God is unique, that God stands alone, and by extension is the only deity worthy of obeying and worshiping. Indeed, that idea seems to follow in the very next line of the Shema that asks us to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Loving God is different from loving our parents, from loving our children or our spouses in many respects. But there is at least one point of commonality. Love of God, like love of parents, love of children, love of our spouses, is an act of devotion, an expression of loyalty. We express our devotion to God differently from how we express our devotion to our parents, our children, our spouses. Our devotion to God, our love for God, is expressed through exclusive worship of God. Yehuda Kurtzer, one of my teachers and instructors at the Shalom Hartman Institute, where I am currently studying, suggests that the remainder of the first paragraph of the Shema contains not so much a series of independent commandments, divorced from the obligation to obey the first commandment and worship God exclusively, but is made up, in fact, of actions that help keep us ever conscious of our obligation to obey that first commandment and to worship God exclusively and wholeheartedly. Indeed, that seems to be the intention of the very next verse, which tells us to keep this commandment to worship God exclusively foremost in our minds. V'hayu hadvarim ha'ele al levavecha. In classical Hebrew, our hearts are more than the seat of our emotions. They are also the seat of our intellect and our memory. What follows then, suggests Kurtzer, is a series of actions to keep God constantly on our minds and to remind us to worship God exclusively. We are to teach this idea to our children. We are to talk about this idea at home and away from home, from morning until night, from when we rise up until the time we go to bed. We are to bind these words on our arm and make them serve as reminders upon our heads. We are even required to inscribe the words on the doorposts of our home, so that we never forget the Lord our God, even when we go into and out of our homes. What better mnemonics could we have than our tefillin, that we wrap around our arms and place upon our foreheads to remind us of the most cerebral of all commandments, our exclusive devotion to and worship of God. Of course, this interpretation begs the question, why women do not wear tefillin? And the answer might very well be, they should. The next time you put on your tefillin, think about them as a physical reminder of our obligation to love God exclusively, to be devoted exclusively to God, and to worship God exclusively. And maybe, just maybe, it's also time for women in our shul to start wearing tefillin too.